Hello there, welcome to VGC. My name's Chris Scullion, the features editor for VGC, and today I'm joined by new boy, everyone shout new boy, Jordan Midler. Hello, Jordan.
Hello, I don't feel particularly new. I feel like I've been writing for this site for about 60 years at this point, but...
I know, technically, many of you will hopefully already know Jordan's name because he's been doing a lot of news and reviews on the site already, but starting February, he'll be a permanent member of staff, which is lovely stuff. And yeah, so I'm glad to have Jordan aboard. Today, though, we come to you with other matters. Today we're here to talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus. You say Arceus as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's the official style guide way to say it nowadays. It used to be Arceus, but at one point the Pokemon company decided, nope, Arceus. We can't have people saying Arc all the time.
I saw somebody recently calling it Arceus, and I was like, that doesn't fly in Britain. That won't really work. But yeah, so I've reviewed it for VGC, and you'll probably be able to see my review on the site by the time this goes up. And just by chance, because Jordan at the time isn't kind of full time with us yet, he's been reviewing it for another publication. So but this is one of those rare situations where both of us have the game and both of us can talk about it. And I mean, I don't want to speak for you, Jordan. I'm sure you'll be able to do the same, but I'm sure we're both agreed that this is a game and a half.
I can't quite believe how good it is. It was one of those things that when coming into it, I was so sure. Not even sure. It was one of those things I didn't want to get myself too excited about it because I'm a huge Pokemon fan. And this, on paper, is the Pokemon game I've always wanted. But the trailers didn't paint it in the best light. And the Pokemon community in general has a way of making you think that everything the Pokemon company does is terrible because they're always so unhappy with it. But when I was still excited about it in a way that, obviously getting review code for anything is exciting because you're playing a new game early. But when this came in, there was like a kind of guttural, like, this has to be good. And I messaged you about a day after we'd both been playing it until about 4 a.m, and it was like, oh my god, this is actually fantastic.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I've stayed up that late playing a game because I'm becoming an old man these days. Not you, you're a young buck. You've still got your life ahead of you. But I'm nearly 40 now and I've got a kid and I'm just like dying inside. Not literally. But it's so like the fact that I was up to like 3-4 in the morning one night playing it, I was like, this is a special game because it's very rare these days that game makes me willingly go past bedtime to keep playing it.
Definitely.
It's crazy.
Why don't you set up kind of how it differs from Pokemon beyond what has been shown? Because I think that's the biggest change, that even though a lot of the things you're doing, such as catching Pokemon and battling, are the same, the way you're doing them has kind of never felt better, and it's kind of minor changes in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing, I've always enjoyed the Pokemon series, as a lot of people have, obviously, but for me, it's quite a slow-paced series generally. You never really associate Pokemon with high-octane action or anything like that. It's always generally run around, get into a battle, we have to put up with that long animation. You're like, right, okay, come on, long turn. But everything now, it seems like the entire game has been rebuilt with speed in mind, and as if the development team sat down and thought, okay, how can we possibly cut as much fat off of this game as possible and make it as slick and as fast as you possibly can for a Pokemon game, because battles just happen there and then, like a Xenoblade game. The catching, you don't even have to get in a battle to catch a Pokemon anymore. Yep. You don't have to wear them down and maybe paralyze them or make them sleep if they're a powerful one. You just hide in a tree and just go, I've done, and hopefully catch it. It's just
so it's also worth noting that battles don't warp you to some random battle zone that is just generally themed around the area. You're just exactly where you are standing. I've had a few instances where you physically throw out the Pokemon and my Pokemon will be on a higher level, like on a rock or something, compared to the wild Pokemon, and they'll actually like angle towards each other and stuff like that. It just makes it feel a lot more, it feels like the battles are actually happening in the world, as opposed to you're wanting to get around one world and battling in a completely other one. Like, it actually joins that together for once.
Yeah, and it's the first time it properly feels like a living, breathing world as well. Like previous Pokemon games, they're pretty, they look nice, but they do feel like a series of kind of separate, just like JRPG top-down maps, where they're all, although they kind of My light nearly fell over there. They all still kind of have that kind of grid structure, even though in recent years they've done away with the four-way movement and they added diagonal movement and later kind of free roaming movement. They all still kind of feel like they're locked to this grid, that everything's made out of squares, and it just feels kind of rigid and slow. But this is just like it feels open for the first time. And although it's not quite at Breath of the Wild level, obviously a lot of people making Breath of the Wild comparisons because I think one of the trailers had that shot that every game has to have now, where you see the guy standing off a cliff edge and you can see the world below them.
And it had a bit of piano. It had like a few keys. And that
exactly. A few notes, a few random diddling. Everyone's that's Breath of the Wild. But it's not really, but it does have that open world feel that feels like you're in a world inhabited by Pokemon for the first time, I think.
Yeah, I say in my review that in some ways it is the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon because it takes mechanics that are so familiar to you and makes them so much bigger than you thought they could be and takes such a leap. And that's really the thing that appealed to me. You talk about like capture mechanics, now you're physically throwing Pokeballs at Pokemon, and in certain instances you won't have to weaken them at all, you can just throw them and that'll be it. And then some of them will be aggressive and you have to do a kind of a traditional battle. And also this is all in aid of completing the first ever Pokedex. It's worth noting there is so much about this game we can't talk about. There's just tons and tons and tons that we can't talk about. So if suddenly our mouth is blurred and there's a sensor noise, that's why. But you're completing the first ever Pokedex, and you can do that by either catching a lot of the same species or raising a species. So it will be like capture 5 Shinx, or watch Shinx use Spark 10 times, and that'll give you each Pokedex entry a level. And that element of it was instantly like, I need to do all of this. I have to do all of this right now. Like it's, I know you said the same when we were talking, but you find yourself sitting in one area for ages because you're just like, I could go back with so much XP here. I'm not going to go back to the professor until I've got like everything and then watch that number go up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so, I'd said in the review, it gives the Pokemon so much more personality and character because of that. Because in previous games, it was like, okay, I've got to catch. Although I say got to catch them all, nobody says that anymore because you can't catch them all. Yeah. There's like 900 now. But although I'm not exactly sure how many there are this time, but there are fewer. It's not like all 900 whatever in there. Yeah. But that thing you're talking about, this extra kind of third tier of the Pokedex, where before it was like, if you see a Pokemon, its name gets added to the Pokedex. Then if you catch the Pokemon, the picture colours in, and then you get, in the past you would get all the information because the Pokedex already knows what it is. It's like, oh, this is a Pikachu, he's an electric mouse, he does this and he does that and does that. But like you say, because this is set in the past and because it's the very first Pokedex you're doing, you know nothing about any of these Pokemon, or at least you're not supposed to. So instead of just catching them, it's almost like each Pokemon has its own set of achievements. And like you say, like the great thing is you don't have to tick them all off to fully research a Pokemon. You can approach them however you want. So if you're the type who prefers to catch Pokemon, you can catch a load of them and that's enough. Or if you like to just keep battling them instead, you can just kick the hell out of like 20 of them, and then that counts. I love the way you can fill in the Pokedex your own way to fit your preferred kind of game style.
And it also fills, you find it filling in so quickly. The amount of times that I've done something and a counter in the top corner will come up and say, you've got 2 of 2 Zubats plus 11, meaning that you've ticked off 11 other things randomly in the Pokedex. And especially towards the latter half of the game, if you're really switching up your Pokemon, that just like doubles up and doubles up and doubles up, which is necessary because I don't know how far you are in the kind of the ranking that the Galaxy team give you, but towards the end you need so much XP. You need like ridiculous amounts of XP. And I'm going back to the professor just being like, oh, I've fully researched this like Ponyta. See, I'm trying to think what can I say?
Which Pokemon we're allowed to talk about.
Another cool element of the Pokemon this time is there are alpha Pokemon, which are like supersized versions of Pokemon that are out in the wild, often 20 or 30 levels higher than you at the start of the game. At the very start of the game, you can walk far enough to find like a level 45 Snorlax just chilling off in the distance. And even if you somehow catch it, it won't obey you. But I think it's cool that instead of being gated in the past where you would get to a certain area in a Pokemon game and a wee NPC would stop you and be like, oh, the bike path's shut, go and do X, Y, and Z. Now it's more like you have this entire area. if you go into this dangerous part of the game, you're just going to get you're going to get blacked out essentially and lose some items. So how did you find that kind of like more freedom?
I love that. The alpha Pokemon are one of my favorite parts of the entire game, and it's like you say, it gives you that freedom to do it. If you want to go in a dangerous bit, as we would say around our neck of the woods, hell mend you, because if you want to go in and get stuck in, go for it. You're probably going to get a kick in, but at least if you're skillful enough, you can get away with it. Like the first time I saw an alpha Pokemon, because we were kind of unaware. Well, I don't know about you, I was certainly unaware of them. I generally try to avoid as much as I can about a game if I know I'm going to be covering it. So when I saw an alpha Pokemon I was like, because they got like glowing red eyes, and they don't behave like other Pokemon of their. Even though every kind of species has its own behavior traits, like some of them will run away when they see you, and some of them will come over and like dance a bit, or some of them will just kind of attack you. Alpha Pokemon almost always attack you as soon as they see you and like run straight for you, and then you have to run or battle. And yeah, like you say, but at first when you got like a bunch of level 10 and level 12 Pokemon, suddenly you're hit with a level 40 Pokemon, you're like, oh, and even then, when by the time your Pokemon are up to level 30, 40, a level 40 Alpha will still destroy them fairly easily with the right moves. But then the satisfaction in realising, wait a minute, you can actually still catch them. And then you can eventually have like a team of 6 Alphas, and when you summon them to like just hit a tree to bring down some berries or to break a rock, and suddenly this big enormous Bidoof comes out. just plows into things. It gets so ridiculous. It's satisfying. I love the fact that Pokemon have different heights now.
Yeah.
It really adds to the feeling, because I'm rambling here, but when you look at the Pokedex in previous games, it would say, oh, here's a Pikachu, it's X foot tall, and here's an Onix, it's that big. The sprite's the same size and everything. It's just really just a cartoon that showed the difference, but now you do see the size difference, and it's amazing. It's really satisfying.
It's really impressive, especially towards the latter half of the game when we start getting into like super rare Pokemon, how much they commit to that size difference, because there are battles towards the end of the game where you're tiny compared to these massive things that are flying in front of you, and it also adds to when you're hunting for things. The draw distance generally isn't great, but it seems like there's a priority on rendering the Pokemon first, because I feel like I can always see Pokemon way further ahead than any kind of detail, and I think that's such a good choice, because the amount of times I've just seen like a large kind of shape in the distance and I've sprinted off after it to see what it was, and it turned out to be an alpha, has been a lot. It's probably worth transitioning into the thing that this game has kind of been lambasted for the most in the pre-release, which I didn't actually think which didn't really impact my playthrough all that much, and that is the performance. How did you find it? How did you primarily play it? Were you handheld? Were you docked? I presume we're both on Switch OLEDs for this,
Yeah, I was mostly docked, but handheld for maybe about 20% of it. But but I mean, I think I'm the same as you and a lot of other people, that when we saw the first trailers, it was like, this looks a bit choppy. This might not be that great. It looks like since then they've prioritized frame rate over graphical detail, and like you say, there's a lot of kind of drawing. I've had rare instances where during a battle, like a tree might flicker in the background or something, or there's kind of weird kind of glitchy things like that. But the trade-off for that is it runs pretty smoothly. I wouldn't say it was like a solid 30, but it's close to a relatively stable 30 for the most part, even when there's a lot of Pokemon running about and a lot going on. And I think I would rather have that than a game that looks a bit better but is like choppy like Breath of the Wild was in some areas. Definitely. I've not really encountered any areas where it's that choppy, so they've definitely optimized the frame rate. And yeah, inevitably, like you said right back at the start, the Pokemon community always find a way to. Nobody hates Pokemon more than Pokemon fans. Someone said to me recently. So I've no doubt when it comes out, you'll get people saying this looks ugly. This is unplayable. It's like, no, it's not. It's fine. There have been uglier games. There have been uglier Pokemon games, and it's totally fine. I had no issues with the performance at all. It could always look better, but it felt fine.
Yeah, and the kind of litmus test is a lot of the time it becomes a third-person shooter when you're trying to throw these Pokeballs at moving targets, and if you can do that, then the performance is acceptable. And I had no points where I was like, oh, I feel like this is completely throwing me off. And even there are a few instances where you can basically force the game. There's a certain distance away where characters will render at like half frame rate. So there are certain flying Pokemon that if you see them far enough away, their kind of wings will just kind of back and forth like that. But as soon as you're like relatively close to something, it looks fine. There's quite a big diversity of actual I know it's the word of the moment, but biomes in the game. Like there's quite a good amount of areas to go to. How did you find that, or did you ever find yourself thinking this is a bit more of the same?
No, I was the same, but like it's interesting that it's not. I think some people may have in their mind a big open world like Breath of the Wild, but it's not quite like that. It's more kind of Monster Huntery in that
Yeah,
the world is split into small kind of areas or biomes, if you will. And it's nice that they kind of they open up as the game progresses, and you do get your feeling like, okay, well, I know that these specific kind of breeds can be found in the seaside area, or these ones could be found over at the kind of at this bit and that bit and that bit, deliberately being vague. And yeah, so I like the kind of the diversity that is in there, and it gives it that kind of. It's one of the kind of things that I'm glad hasn't changed much, because previous Pokemon games you always felt, oh, well, I know this bit and mountain this and this snowy bit over here and all that, and you get a feeling of a sense of the world and knowing where everything is, and that's retained here. And it's just I can't say enough good about it. But I want to go back on what you were talking about, the third person action stuff.
yeah,
That's, to me, that was the thing that stuck with me most, is that when it kicks off, and especially my favourite bits of the game, which is when the time space disturbance things
yeah,
happen, and every now and then this big rainbow dome appears in the distance, and you go, I quite fancy going there. And when you go inside it, it's suddenly like this really dystopian version of the world, and then eventually these like rare kind of powerful ones will appear, and then suddenly it becomes a proper action game at that point, because you're hiding in the tall grass, you're diving out the way, they're all attacking you at once, and you're doing like Dark Souls dives to get out the way, and throwing balls about and throwing it properly becomes action packed, and it's there where the performance, the frame rate matters, like you said, because you could get away with it being a bit choppy if it was just old school turn-based Pokemon all the time. But for something like this where reactions are actually important, they did the right thing. I just love it, mate.
yeah. What did you think of the actual selection of Pokemon? Because we specifically can't say how many there is, but we can say that there's a solid representation of every generation, apart from Generation 4 gets a lot of focus, which makes sense because obviously these games are set in like a prequel version of Sinnoh. But what did you think of the selection of Pokemon, and were you as surprised as I was about a certain set of Pokemon that aren't in it, shall we say?
I'm not sure which ones you're referring to, but let's say yes,
Okay.
for the sake of safety. I was happy enough with the selection. A lot of kind of fan favourites are in there.
Yeah.
I'm saying that purely selfishly as a Psyduck fan. I was happy to see plenty of Psyducks in there. I think it was a nice range, a nice selection. It's good that. Like I say, I briefly kind of mentioned in the review, this is the perfect entry point for anyone who's always been kind of keen about Pokemon, but is wary of how daunting the size of the Pokedex now is, because with 900 or so characters to essentially learn by this point, like a lot of people coming into Pokemon for the first time will just be like, mate, I don't even know where to start. This is where to start, because it's a nice enough selection over all the generations that you can kind of go, oh, okay, and kind of learn. And like I was saying before, they all have kind of more of a personality now, because you're in amongst them, and they're not just random sprites that are popping up as you run backwards and forwards in grass, and like you can kind of study their behavior and see how some of them act, and then add in the extra kind of research mechanics on top of that, where you're spending more time with each species. This is the best kind of entry point to kind of learn the selection of Pokemon that are included here, and kind of properly get to know them, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if there's no, as much as it went down poorly with the community, there's no world in which these games are sustainable if they have to port 1,000 Pokemon every time they do one of them. Like, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually like a great excuse as to why to do it in canon, because theoretically there's plenty of Pokemon that canonically wouldn't have been discovered yet, and there's a few that wouldn't have been like created yet. So it makes sense that it's like, and I feel like a lot of the Pokemon choices feel very organic. So like Rapidash and Ponyta are like horse Pokemon, live in this field land kind of area, same as Bidoof. The Psyducks and the Golducks are near like water, so it gives you a lot of kind of the Pokemon fit. It doesn't feel like there's certain Pokemon that are a wildly strange species in this habitat just because. And I think that's like a real strength of the game. You can almost expect what to catch based on where you're going, as opposed to racking your brain as to what's actually going to happen. And I think the only real thing for me was that I feel like the kind of some of the cave areas, which have always been kind of a staple of Pokemon, aren't translated incredibly well here. It feels like they're kind of empty and just have Geodudes and Zubats, which was always the case, but it feels like that could have been an opportunity to change. We've been extremely positive about this game. Have you got any niggles at all? For me, it was, I didn't think that the noble Pokemon, which are essentially, because there are no gyms in this game, there are noble Pokemon that you take down. You've probably seen Cleavor, which is the one that has been revealed so far, and that fight is kind of different mechanically, and I didn't love that aspect as much. What did you think?
Yeah, the boss fight, that was, I'll talk about just that one, just for, again, to be safe. But yeah, that one was like, it was okay. I mean, it was certainly it was a change of pace, which was nice, and it was the first time kind of caught me by surprise. It was a bit tricky until you kind of get the hang of it. But it's your typical boss fight you would get in any kind of third-person action game where you learn the patterns and then attacks. So yeah, that felt a wee bit flat for me. In terms of other things, I'm genuinely struggling. I mean, it's got that same kind of Pokemon syndrome where once you get going, the earlier areas basically become a write-off because like the first couple of areas are then kind of populated with like level 8, level 9 ones you've seen before, and essentially, unless you're getting side quests, of which there are a lot, which kind of specifically tell you to go back to those areas, then for the most part those bits are a write-off, and you're kind of unlikely to return there unless you're polishing off some Pokedex things you've missed, or going back to look for some alphas, or even some shinies. I managed to get 1 or 2 shinies, which was a nice surprise. But that's really everything about it, even stuff that I've not even talked about, the fact that in the past, if you wanted to heal your Pokemon, you had to leg it all the way back to the nearest Pokemon Center, then give your Pokemon to the nurse and watch them all go bloop, 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 and make the tune and then all. Whereas now you just hit minus, hit X, and choose which base camp you want to go to, and you're instantly teleported to somewhere where a base camp where you can rest and recharge. You can rearrange your Pokemon. There's a shop there. You can craft items. Everything's just there. Nothing feels like a slog. Nothing feels like a chore. Everything you want to do is just like snap, snap, snap. You can do it really quickly. It's so satisfying, the gameplay loop.
And specifically because Jubilife Village is the only real kind of town in the game, everything is there. So all of your kind of like your shops for customization and stuff like that, and like there's the prairie kind of area, the pasture, that's what it's called, which is essentially your big collection of Pokemon. Although I didn't really get the function of that compared to just swapping them at a base, especially because there's no breeding in the game. I thought that might be like the only place you can breed, but there's no eggs, there's no held items. There's a lot of stuff that it makes sense that there's no multiplayer battling in the game, because a lot of those mechanics, we've not even talked about the fact that the actual battle mechanics introduce agile style and strong style moves, which are essentially optional modifiers on your moves that say a strong style move for your attack can be stronger but you'll miss a turn, or an agile style move might allow you to attack twice. That kind of thing is great, but also I can't imagine what that would have been like having to balance for an actual multiplayer game, so that kind of makes sense that it's not in there. How did you find the battling aspect generally? Because it's certainly pushed kind of further back than it is in typical Pokemon games.
Yeah, it is, but it's also interesting because I found it more I won't say difficult because it's not a massively difficult game in the grand scheme of things, but I did find myself using potions and revives a lot more than I do in other Pokemon. And I don't know if that's just because of, like you were saying earlier, that desire to stay in the world for longer and to say, I want to gather as much as I can before I return to my base camp and report my findings. So and also these kind of time space moments. So you're kind of going through a lot of health potions and stuff like that. But battling, the thing that I get a kick out of the battling, and it's just like a daft wee thing, is I love that you are still an active participant in the battles as a character, and it's not just going through menus anymore. Like, the menus are there, but at the same time you can still run around
Yeah,
and get a good view and look about, and even if you step in the middle, you'll get hit sometimes by the attacks. And the fact that when you do an attack, you see your wee guy pointing and saying, like, do that. And I love the kind of extra touches there. But for other than the agile and the strong stuff, I like the fact that the battling is generally similar to the kind of main series. It hasn't completely abandoned the whole sense of what Pokemon is, which I think would have caused absolute uproar
yeah,
in the community if they did ditch turn-based battling altogether. It could have been carnage, but I think it's a nice compromise where battling itself just feels a lot quicker. Everything just feels more streamlined and
definitely.
proved.
And I think the recent Pokemon games have been accused of being too easy because they have like EXP share, and while that remains in the game, I felt like the opponent's Pokemon levels ramped up way quicker, to the point where at the final boss I was under leveled, despite the fact that I spent ages like grinding for Pokedex levels, which in turn gets you XP. So I think there's a conscious effort to make it a bit more difficult, which I think they might have learned from the fact that in the Diamond and Pearl remakes, that game was incredibly easy until you got to the Elite Four, and then it was absolutely ridiculously hard. So there's a bit more of a balance here. But yeah, I think the battling works well. And also, talking about being an active participant, I love the fact that in a wild battle, instead of pressing run to run away, you can physically just run, and then if you get far enough away, it'll just say you ran away. I just think that's a fun touch. Like, it makes you feel like you're an actual trainer, not just a random like character. Before we kind of wrap up here, do you think this is the direction that Pokemon has to continue in, or do you think they do go back? Because personally, I just want this to be how it goes now. I can't really face another 8 gyms Elite Four kind of game unless it's molded in this way.
I'm kind of, like I said in the review, I don't mind as long as there's more of this. Like, if this becomes second series in the same way that Metroid Prime became the kind of the second series, and so you still had your 2D Metroid, even though we barely got any, and then you get your 3D, your first person Metroid. If that's the way there's going to go, then I'm all for it. I'm really keeping everything crossed that Arceus is a subtitle for a reason, and there's going to be Pokemon Legends this, Pokemon Legends that in the future, and there will be more games in this style but in different time zones. I'd like to see like a modern day one, or one even set in the future, whether you're fighting like robot Pokemon, Robomon, if you will. So there's a lot they could do with this template now that they've kind of nailed it on their first go, and there's always room for improvement. Like in some ways, obviously in terms of performance. Hopefully by the time there's another one, we'll have a successor to the Switch or a Switch Pro or whatever it could be, and then the main niggles in terms of performance, and not so much performance but how it looks, will be kind of ironed out. But there has to be more. There has to be more games like this. I mean, at the time of recording this, as is always the case, we don't know what the response has been from the rest of the gaming critic world, but I would be massively surprised if a lot of people were down on it. I think it's got to be quite well received across the board, I would imagine. It's certainly going to be one of the best rated Pokemon games for quite a while. I think it's properly breathes new life, and it's exactly what people have wanted for decades now. A proper open world Pokemon game where you feel like you're part of the world, and more of it, please.
Yeah, I think it's an indication that this is Game Freak that did this. This is the proper big studio. So I think if this goes well for them, which I can't imagine it not. First of all, it's a Pokemon game, so that's 14 million copies guaranteed off the bat. Like, if it also does incredibly well, from a kind of critical perspective, which I think it will, and from the response, just kind of the kind of taking the temperature on social media as more and more of the game has kind of come out and some Japanese press have got to play it, it feels like the tide is somewhat turning now that people have actually played the game and they're like, okay, this is what it is. So yeah, I think I would be very surprised if the next game from Game Freak isn't one of these. If it's like Pokemon Legends, Pokemon Legends Johto or whatever, because they never did a Let's Go Johto. So if that's how they do their second they do the second Johto. They can't do Let's Go. They can't do Legends Kanto. We can't go back to Kanto again. We just can't do it. There will be mass revolutions.
Pokemon Legends Mewtwo.
Yeah, it's just set now because Mewtwo was created like 30 years ago in the canon or whatever. It'd be quite cool to do a Legends game based on Mew, like go back that far. Like that would be an interesting one. Although Mew would be like the only Pokemon, it'd be over in 5 minutes. But yeah, I'm very impressed. I'm very happy with it, and there is an incentive to catch them all, and I think I'm going to do it. I want to see the thing, you know. So
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, you can check out both of our reviews. Chris's is on VGC video review as well, Chris.
Yep, definitely. It's going to be an interesting video review. If you haven't watched the video review yet by the time you watch this, apologies for the fact that it's the same 6 minutes of footage looped. But this has been one of the most heavily embargoed games I think I've ever covered, despite the fact that it's leaked all over the place. So yeah, but we were only allowed to show a total of 6 minutes of footage, and the review is 3,000 words long. So naturally, the video comes in at a little bit longer than 6 minutes. So yeah, you'll see a lot of the footage kind of looped again and again. But that's maybe for the best, because this is a game to be kind of discovered yourself, and it's maybe good that if you've managed to avoid too much of it, maybe read my review, read Jordan's review, watch our videos, and then get the game and kind of explore it for yourself, because there's a hell of a lot here.
It almost warrants a second review like a month after everyone's had a chance to play it, so you can actually talk about like the other 80% of the game. So maybe we'll catch up down the line once people have actually had a chance, and maybe get some folk on and discuss there, because it's been so strange having, because I only know of you and about 2 other people in the world that have this game, so there's been so much that I've been dying to talk about with someone, but there's no one I can go to and be like, has this happened to you, so that'll be a cool experience. But thank you for joining me, Chris. Be sure to subscribe to VGC for more conversations like this, and check out Chris's review on the website. From me, Jordan, it's goodbye. From Chris,
goodbye,
and we'll see you later.